Greetings, fellow Autobots. If you're listening to this, you are our last hope.
Ah, just kidding. It's just me, King Cheerio85 here. First off, thank you for checking out my channel. Second off, as long as you're joining us today, let's take a look at the first two episodes of Transformers War for Cybertron, Chapter 1, Siege, the Netflix exclusive series. Alrighty, why don't we go ahead and get right down to it. We begin our journey into the War for Cybertron with an aerial shot of a Seeker squadron that appears to be in mid-skirmish. A lone Seeker gets shot down and crashes into a dilapidated landscape. It is here we meet our first two characters, Bumblebee and Wheeljack. This, of course, being an homage to the first episode of the original Transformers Generation 1 series, in which they were the first two Transformers seen on screen. They're out scavenging for Energon. Bumblebee motions for Wheeljack to be quiet as a Seeker, which appears to be Skywarp, transforms and lands near them. He starts scanning the area for movement and then just decides to just move on. Apparently that was good enough. I guess the Cybertronian tech isn't able to just go ahead and detect any type of life sign. What's the point of that if it can't? Okay, I guess whatever. Bumblebee then leads Wheeljack to some kind of abandoned transport facility, which not only has a bunch of Energon, but also a space bridge, which Wheeljack is thrilled about. He begins turning on some of the controls, freaking Bumblebee out, who's all like, dude, Seekers, while Wheeljack retorts back that Prime will want to know all about this. This kind of ticks Bumblebee off a bit as he wants nothing to do with the war and just urges Wheeljack to leave. Like pack up, get our stuff, and go. He's found the Energon, job's done, I just want to get paid. And of course, naturally, that's when the Seekers decide to show up. And they don't just show up, they're like automatically already having surrounded both Bumblebee and Wheeljack. Seeing Jetfire in all of his glory, bossing the Seekers around, like this appearance here made me super duper stoked about the fact that I own that toy. Okay, so Jetfire refers to both of them as Autobots, but Bumblebee is very quick to chime in like, hey, I'm not an Autobot. To which Starscream is basically like, well, you're with an Autobot, with Wheeljack, so I'm gonna just go ahead and kill you both. And Jetfire decides to go ahead and step in right there, showing that even though he is like high up, he's basically second in command of the Decepticons throughout most of this series. Like even though he is effectively the number two, he's still honorable. The Starscream, on the other hand, ready and willing to execute both of them on sight, but Jetfire intervenes, slices Starscream's arm off, which was awesome. This seems more like comeuppance for Starscream's dickish behavior that he's well known for throughout the entirety of the franchise. All right, and also it's basically right here. I kind of wanted to point out something that irks me. And virtually, it wasn't consistent throughout the G1 cartoon because it's the G1 cartoon. But the more well-known images of the Seekers firing their weapons has them leaving them attached to their arms and just firing them out like big arm cannons, which is awesome. And that's a very iconic look. And it makes sense to me. Why would they want to take the time to remove them, to shoot them just like a pew-pew gun? But for some reason in this series, they made the decision that every single time the Seekers are using their guns, they should be handheld, which, like I said, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. I don't feel that they need to do that since they're the same guns that are attached to their wings when they're flying around, and they don't have like prehensile fingers pulling triggers on them attached to their wings, so why would they need to detach them to fire them like, regular guns? It makes no sense to me when they could just do that. Starscream gets kind of pissed off by having his arm chopped off. He then exclaims at Jetfire that if he were in charge, he'd have already killed Jetfire with his own hand, to which Wheeljack rather hilariously retorts, you mean that hand, pointing to Starscream's dismembered arm lying over on the ground. Which naturally earns Jetfire a nice good smacking from one of the other Seekers. I think it was Thundercracker. So here's another thing I need to point out. So Jetfire must not be at all well liked throughout in the Seekers at all, since Starscream has the charisma of a wet fart, and they immediately just side with Starscream when Starscream says that they should just go ahead and kill Jetfire along with Bumblebee and the Autobot Wheeljack. They just go with it. They immediately start pointing their weapons at Jetfire, who, being none too happy, is just, ready to start taking them out. This, of course, causes a bit of a ruckus and a distraction, so Wheeljack and Bumblebee try to use that action to escape. Unfortunately for them, that does not go very well, since immediately walking down the path that they would have used to escape comes Megatron. Oh crap, things are about to get real. He just walks up, and the weight of his steps is enough to convey that he is a major threat. Once their conversation is basically finished, Starscream just kind of again acts like a dick because he's Starscream. And it's obvious to Megatron, Wheeljack is not going to hear any more of his rhetoric. He goes ahead and orders both Wheeljack and Bumblebee to be executed. So he goes ahead, orders both of their executions, and it looks like that might actually happen, and then all of a sudden Optimus Prime bursts in on the scene. It's during this whole scene when Optimus comes in, and that we learn that Megatron had sent a treaty to Optimus Prime to sign that would have had the Autobots surrender and basically given Megatron complete control over them. And Optimus Prime obviously had refused to sign this. The rest of the conversation does not really go very well, and it leads to a little bit of a fist fight between Optimus and Megatron, which Optimus gets his whole rear end handed to him during that thing. He is obviously, in this incarnation, not a physical match for Megatron, at least not at this point. Somewhere in this fight, we learn that Megatron had murdered Alpha Trion. It's hinted at that Optimus and Megatron were both students of Alpha Trion. And due to the difference in conflict in beliefs, and Megatron being unable to have Alpha Trion join his way of thinking, outright killed him. And again, they have another small fight, and it looks like Megatron is just about to end Optimus once and for all, when out of the background, Elita 1 just starts sniping on him, laying into him, and Megatron is able to fire a few shots back at her. But during this whole kerfuffle, all the Autobots and Bumblebee, I gotta specify because he's very adamant that he's not an Autobot, they all managed to get away. Okay, so Optimus, Wheeljack, and Bumblebee rendezvous. Elita 1 doesn't know who Bumblebee is and doesn't trust him, which is actually kind of hilarious. I believe she pulls a gun on him right away, which is great. And she also decides that right in front of those guys is a good time to go ahead and scold the leader of the Autobots for leaving himself wide open and having the explosion on the bridge get set off that allowed them to escape a bit too close to himself, putting himself in danger. Now, after a little bit of convincing, they managed to get Bumblebee to head back to the Autobot base with them. The Autobot base is an arc. This arc is actually just hiding behind a cloaking field, and Bumblebee is he's a little bit off balance entering through it. And interestingly, once we go inside the base and we see all the damaged Autobots, we also meet up with Red Alert. Red Alert goes ahead and gives Bumblebee a checkup. Optimus heads back to consult with Ultra Magnus. Ultra Magnus goes ahead and pleads with Optimus to, if he won't sign the treaty, to at least sit down with Megatron and try to have some form of negotiation. Optimus doesn't believe that there's any chance for a negotiation, because both of their goals are so disparate. They don't believe that there is a middle ground to work from. After this whole exchange takes place, Ultra Magnus gets super frustrated with Optimus and tells him he is just as stubborn as Megatron. Optimus finally walks out to go speak with Bumblebee. And before Optimus can even get a word in, Bumblebee just immediately tells him, look, I'm not interested in joining your cause. Just pay me so I can leave. And Optimus tries, of course, to deny that's what he was doing, and Bumblebee immediately is just not hearing a word of it. And Optimus is just, says, look, if you don't want to be here, you're absolutely free to leave. So that's what Bumblebee tries to do, but then Elita 1 and Hound both step in his way. Hound being paranoid that since Bumblebee now knows the location of their base, that he could go over to the Decepticons and just rat them all out. Elita 1 suggesting that they just murder Bumblebee right there on the spot. To which Optimus has his best line reading of this entire series, where he just shouts out that we are not Decepticon. That has Hound and Elita 1 both step aside to allow Bumblebee to leave, which, you know, obviously he does. And on the way out, you see Ultra Magnus staring at him as he's leaving. We next join the Decepticons, and we see this big Coliseum, and Megatron is delivering his big dictator speech, which is full of propaganda and half-truths. We get a quick shot of Starscream standing behind Megatron, who's had his arm reattached. So outside of the Coliseum, walking towards it, we see that there's a shrouded figure. Like, he's literally just wearing a cloth shroud, just walking towards the Coliseum. We have absolutely no way of knowing who this character could possibly be, right? That shroud is just covering way too much of his body to be able to tell who he is. He's a complete mystery. So all the while, this character is just moving closer and closer. So episode 2 begins with this shrouded figure coming in and just knocking out any guards that seems to get in his way. He's just walking towards the throne. And this whole rally that Megatron had seems to have just winded down completely. So this shrouded figure comes up. He gets pretty close, and that's when Starscream and Jetfire and the rest of the Seekers start aiming their weapons at him, which Megatron orders his Seekers and everything to not open fire without his say-so. This character that's in the shroud walks up, puts his arms akimbo, just stands there in front, and Barricade, like taking this as a sign, fires a warning shot, whizzes past his head. And Megatron doesn't take too kindly to this and gives Barricade a little bit of a comeuppance for disobeying an order. After this, Megatron walks up, asks this figure what his purpose is, and at this point, he takes off his shroud to reveal that he's Ultra Magnus, which of course we have freaking known all along, since this little cloak only covered his head. Ultra Magnus then reveals that he came there to surrender, with the hopes that he'd be able to convince Megatron to be able to sit down with Prime and negotiate the possibility of ending the war. We learn for certain that Ultra Magnus, Optimus, and Megatron were all students of Alpha Trion. However, during this whole conversation, Megatron just will not budge on a single thing. He doesn't feel there's anything that it needs to negotiate on. This leaves Ultra Magnus in a very hopeless position. Now, seeing how these talks are going absolutely nowhere, Megatron orders that Ultra Magnus be locked up in a cell. Now, back at the Autobot base, Optimus has somehow already learned about Ultra Magnus' actions off screen, and he delivers that news to a group of shocked Autobots. Now, in order to fill the void left by Ultra Magnus, he goes ahead and promotes Elita 1 to Ultra Magnus' old position, which Elita is a little reluctantly about taking, but accepts, knowing that there's really no other option. We go back to the Decepticon base, where Shockwave has his own development that he wants to share with Megatron. He's discovered that by combing through Alpha Trion's old work and research, that the Allspark is real. This is the item that gave life to the original Cybertronians, according to legend. So it's natural that most of the race would really consider this as just a myth and not a fact. Now, Shockwave, of course, being Shockwave, shows Megatron that with the Allspark in hand, he has the ability to create effectively a super weapon, which once activated would send out a wave that would reformat all Autobots on the planet to being Decepticons, in what Jetfire remarks as a process that looks very painful. And obviously this would win the Decepticons the war. During this point in time, Ultra Magnus is listening in. Ultra Magnus then sends a message to Optimus Prime. We cut back to the Autobot base. Prime receives the message from Ultra Magnus and decides to form a team to locate the Allspark first. Many of the Autobots Optimus assembles in front of him to discuss this plan with are, we'll say, less than thrilled. Optimus, on the other hand, has absolute faith in Ultra Magnus' words, so he goes ahead and makes preparations to search for the Allspark anyway. Wheeljack chimes in that with a few modifications and quite a bit of energon, he can rig the external sensors on the Ark to scan for, I guess, energy readings that would be consistent with an all-powerful creation object. Back with the Decepticons, Soundwave goes ahead and interrupts Shockwave's briefing to inform Megatron that he just intercepted a transmission from the prison cells. Ultra Magnus' transmission to Optimus Prime. Megatron's not really pleased by this, but once Jetfire chimes in that Optimus is going to be like out there searching full force, he makes the comment like, well, if he's going to be looking for it, we should go ahead and help him find it. Obviously, with a plan in mind. Optimus and Alita are having some kind of heart-to-heart. Now, the end of their conversation concludes with both of them agreeing that this isn't the life that they had imagined. However, it's still a life worth fighting for. They're then interrupted by another transmission from Ultra Magnus, claiming to have found the coordinates for the Allspark. Things aren't as they seem, though, as we then see that this transmission was a fabrication made by Soundwave. Megatron orders his forces to get in place to wipe out the Autobot search groups. Optimus' team arrives at the coordinates given in the transmission and are completely unaware that they are surrounded by several mid and later wave Siege Deluxes. Each Autobot team then begins to search the area, all remaining cautious. Chromia's team appears to have found something, and Cog goes on ahead to open some panels that are on a wall, and he discovers a box full of refined energon. Of course, this is all bait for the Decepticon trap, and the trap is sprung with Impactor blowing a hole in Cog's side. The Autobot search parties attempt to regroup and retreat, and here in possibly one of the most tonally bizarre moments I've seen in most Transformers fiction, we have Optimus who catches Impactor's hook, tosses it back at him, which then pans a little lower to reveal that Impactor is now tied up like in his own rope, you know, like an old cartoon. It's really weird. We then see Alita 1's team barge in, and Red Cog weaponizes with Sideswipe. Barricade jumps out of the dust cloud to go ahead and sucker punch Chromia. He's then smashed away by Hound, who sideswipes him with his vehicle form. Optimus is about to shake down a group of cons when Skywheels then sucker punches him out of nowhere. Man, these cons sure love sucker punching bots. Optimus lays the smackdown on Flytread and also shoots down another Seeker. So do these guys not know about evasive maneuvers? Like, the Seekers seem to be easier targets than the ground troops. Said Seeker crashes into a rickety old building, which then explodes and sends the whole thing falling on Impactor's head. Using the chaos caused by the building collapse, Alita 1 called for a retreat, with Optimus carrying Chromia and the injured Cog on his truck bed. Back at the Autobot base, Cog is rushed to Red Alert for repairs, and Wheeljack informs Optimus that without more energon, future uses of the scanner will seriously impact the ship's cloaking capabilities. Back at the site of the battle, Barricade is leading the search effort to locate the missing Impactor and the box of energon, having little luck with either, it appears. Back at the Decepticon base, Megatron is far from pleased. Shockwave states that it seems neither faction got the energon, pointing to an unknown third party, which we the audience know to be Bumblebee, the energon scavenger, since the camera goes ahead and cuts to him anyway. And it is desperation that both Optimus and Megatron continue to show that really seems to define this series. Optimus taking more and more desperate actions as a means of ensuring his people's survival, and Megatron's acts of desperation to ensure all Cybertron exists under one banner. Both characters actually desiring the same result, ironically. Peace. Well, that'll do it for this look at episodes 1 and 2 of Transformers War for Cybertron Siege on Netflix. Come back next week and we'll take a look at episodes 3 and 4. Until then, please go ahead and like, subscribe, share this with your friends, and go ahead and comment down below if you think I can do anything better, or if there's something else that you actually want me to take a look at. So, that being said, I'll see you guys over in the next one. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to smash that like button. If you're new to the channel, you can check out past videos here, or you can click here to check out my newest upload. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to stay notified on all future videos.